We're excited today to have Joanne McLaren, who's going to be speaking about the book that she's written about the veterans of West Lincoln. I'm going to invite Joanne up to start her talk tonight. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. This is about the West Lincoln veterans of World War I. Coming up to 2014 to 2018, many historical groups were discussing what they could do to honor the Canadian World War I veterans. While I was visiting other towns and museums in Ontario, where there were museums listed veterans, I started to wonder if our township of West Lincoln had such a plaque or list. For those who may not be familiar with our township of West Lincoln, we are a landlocked farming community located in the heart of or center of Niagara, halfway between Lake Erie on the south and Lake Ontario on the north. There was no township of West Lincoln prior to 1970, when the regional government was formed. Prior to that, we were 3 individual townships: Caistor, Gainsborough, and South Grimsby. When I inquired locally, no one seemed to know if a list or any plaques existed. I discovered some of the existing local churches had plaques with a few names of the servicemen who belonged to their parish. Gratefully, the local Legion was able to provide me with a list, but unfortunately, it was incomplete. Lest we forget, who do we not want to forget? Who do we want to remember? Many historical collections have information of a veteran written in chart form. They seem brief. What happened to those who came home? While not wanting to get too personal, I wondered if they married. Did they go on to have good careers? Do we want only to remember our veterans' names, or do we want to remember them as people? That's my query. So I decided to try and collect the names and some information on those who enlisted from the townships of Caistor, Gainsborough, and South Grimsby. Those townships contained many hamlets and the village of Smithville. How hard could it be? Maybe 50, 60 names? To my surprise, I found over 200 names in World War I alone. I started out to make a list of the veterans' names, and once my research was done and my questions were answered, I preferred the story of these brave men over charts. Eventually, the stories turned into a book. For a veteran of the Canadian Expeditionary Force who either enlisted or was drafted into service to be included in this book, he had to have some connection to the area. Therefore, he had to be born, lived, married, died, or buried in Caistor, Gainsborough, or South Grimsby townships, later known as West Lincoln, or his parents or next of kin lived in this area. There were some veterans who did not make the list. Fred Clark, too many Clarks enlisted, over 2,000 Canada-wide. We do not know if Fred is Alfred, Frederick, Wilfred, or if Fred was his second given name. I would mention the military goes by your first given name, regardless of the name you may go by. And attestation papers for each veteran for World War I are 18 to 120 pages long for each man. Leonard Frost found attestation papers for 3 different Leonard Frosts, but I could find no connection to West Lincoln. Thomas Daniels found attestation papers for 5 Thomas Daniels, but no connection to West Lincoln. Herbert Williams found attestation papers for 39 Herbert Williams. Did not find enough information to confirm which Herbert had a connection to West Lincoln. In the book, the veterans are listed in alphabetical order, with those who did not come home listed in the first section, and those who came home listed in the second section. Something I learned while processing the book: to place a small poppy beside the name of each fallen veteran I would be charged for color on both sides of each page, increasing the costs by 2/3. Also, the poppy is copyrighted and can only be used with permission. While discussing the use of the poppy, a friend suggested using the forget-me-not. I appreciated this suggestion as it is exactly what I was trying to convey. They should not be forgotten. The forget-me-not appears on the front cover of the book. I'd like to read a few of the veterans' stories. Private Percy Milton Olmsted. Percy Milton Olmsted was born June 14, 1894 in Elko, Gainsborough Township, Lincoln County, Ontario, the son of Frank and Roland and Matilda Alberta Vaughan Olmsted. In 1911, Percy lived with his parents and brother on Lot 11, Concession 4 in Gainsborough Township and was attending high school. When Percy enlisted with the 98th Battalion CEF on January 17, 1916 in Beamsville, Ontario, he stated his present address was Bismarck, Gainsborough Township, Lincoln County. His trade was clerk. He was single. At the time of enlistment, he belonged to the active militia, the 44th Regiment, and listed his father, Frank Olmsted of Bismarck, as his next of kin. Private Olmsted with the 98th Battalion sailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia aboard the SS Lapland. On July 8th, arriving in Liverpool, England, and on July 25th, then on to Otterpool. On July 26, 1916, where he was transferred to the 20th Battalion. By September 16, 1916, Private Olsen was serving in France. In January of 1918, a Good Conduct Badge was awarded to him, and shortly after, he was granted 14 days leave. On October 13, 1918, while serving in Boulogne, France, Private Olmsted received gunshot wounds to both legs, though more severe to his left lower leg. As an invalid, he sailed to Canada September 11, 1919, aboard the HMHS Uruguay, bound for Halifax, Nova Scotia, and before his discharge, he was able to walk 1 mile, though slowly. Private Percy Milton Olmsted of the 98th Battalion was discharged from service, medically unfit, on November 25, 1919 in Toronto, Ontario. He intended to return to Bismarck, Ontario after his discharge. On March 4, 1920, Percy, now a salesman from Gainsborough Township, married Josephine Parker, also of Gainsborough Township, the daughter of William Thomas and James Broughton Parker. The wedding took place at St. Anne's Presbyterian Church, St. Anne's, Ontario. In 1921, Mr. and Mrs. Percy M. Olmsted, with their infant son, are living on Lot 12, Concession 4, Gainsborough Township. Percy's current occupation is as a retail salesman. His parents are living on Lot 11, Concession 4, in the same township. The family owned and ran a general store in Bismarck. The house the store was in is still there today. In 1931, prior to his death, Percy was employed as a bridge tender on the Welland Ship Canal. As a patient of the Niagara Sanatorium, St. Catharines, Ontario, Percy died of pulmonary tuberculosis at the age of 36 years, and on May 16, 1931, and is buried in the Bismarck Cemetery, Bismarck, Lincoln County, Ontario. In the Wellandport Women's Institute Tweedsmuir Histories, a newspaper clipping of September 13, 1919 states, Percy M. Olmsted is remembered as serving in France or Belgium. The next one is Private Herbert Ross Pyatt. Herbert Ross Pyatt was born September 13, 1893 in Caistor Township, the second son of Amos and Diana Lickman Pyatt. Herbert is the youngest brother of Sergeant John Stanley Pyatt and older brother to William Irving Pyatt, who also enlisted with the surname of Wheeler. In 1911, Herbert is living with his parents and siblings on Lot 14, Concession 7, Caistor Township, Ontario, and is working as a laborer at a basket factory with his younger brother, William Irving Pyatt. In 1916, the Saskatchewan census lists Herbert as married. His wife, Nora, is living in Pleasantdale, Saskatchewan, and he is listed as being with the military overseas. When Herbert R. Pyatt enlisted on March 1st, 1916 in Melfort, Saskatchewan, he stated he was born in Abington, Caistor Township, Lincoln County, Ontario, and his birth date as September 14th, 1893. His trade was laborer. He'd never served in any military force, and listed his wife, Nora Eleanor Pyatt of Melfort, Saskatchewan, as his next of kin. Private Pyatt sailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia aboard the HMT Saxonia on February 18th, arriving in England on March 4th, 1918. He served with 188th Battalion CEF, transferred to the 249th Battalion, and was with the 5th Battalion Saskatchewan Regiment, Canadian Infantry in France on May 10th, 1918. Private Herbert Ross Pyatt was killed in action on July 26, 1918. And I'm quoting, he took part in a raid made by 9 officers and 250 other ranks of his battalion near the Broken Mill, east of Arras, on the evening of July 26, 1918. During the raid, he received shrapnel wounds in the legs and stomach. He was immediately carried back to our front line, but expired on reaching it. This is from the Casualty of War report. Private Pyatt is buried in Douce Anne's British Cemetery, Etron, 4 miles northwest of Arras, past to Calais, France. Service records mention his mother, Diana Pyatt, was living in Melfort, Saskatchewan at the time of his death. Private Pyatt, 5th Battalion, is commemorated in the First World War Book of Remembrance, page 488, located in Ottawa, Ontario, Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and the Saskatchewan Virtual War Memorial. Note, at the time of Herbert's death, he left behind his parents, wife, 2 young children, and 2 of his brothers had also enlisted, and they were overseas at the time of his death. One brother, John Pyatt, who had been wounded 4 times, was in England. Another brother, Irwin Pyatt, or William Irwin Pyatt Wheeler, was serving with the Canadian Cavalry in France and was probably in action at the time. A cousin, Walter Pyatt, was also at the front in the Canadian Cavalry. Private Baden Robson. He was born in West Bromwich, Staffordshire County, England, July 10th, 1900, the son of James and Sarah J. Robson. In 1901, Baden was living with his parents and siblings at 29 Portway Road, Civil Parish, an urban district of Oldbury, Ward of Rounds, Greece, Worcestershire, England. Baden Robson, age 8, along with his brother Jesse, who was 10 years old, immigrated to Canada with the Dr. Bernardo Party, sailing from Liverpool, England, aboard the SS Dominion. On March 12, 1908, to Portland, Maine, USA, then arriving in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, on March 23, 1908, with his final destination to be Toronto, Ontario, Canada. When Baden Robson was drafted with the 1st Depot Battalion, 1st Canadian Overseas Regiment, on June 1st, 1918, in Toronto, Ontario, he stated his current address was RR1 Silverdale, Ontario. His birth date was July 18th, 1899. His birthplace was Birmingham, England. His trade was farmer. He was single, and he listed his mother, Mrs. Sarah J. Robson of 69 Sandy Lane, Birmingham, Aston, England, as his next of kin. Private Robson was sent to Edmonton, Alberta, where he spent some time in the hospital with influenza. Then he was transported to Vancouver, British Columbia, where he boarded the SS Protestalas on December 26, 1918, and was serving in Siberia on July 15, 1919. He was attached to the 259th Canadian Rifles SEF, which were evacuated to Canada on May 19, 1919. Private Robson sailed from Siberia aboard the Empress of Russia, arriving in Vancouver, British Columbia on May 29, 1919, and was discharged due to demobilization on June 11, 1919. On that day, transportation was arranged for Private Robson to return to Silverdale, Ontario. Sometime later, Baden Robson returned to England, and in the summer of 1934 in Birmingham District County of Warwickshire, England, he married Muriel M.A. Howard. Baden Robson died March of 1977 at the age of 76 years in Birmingham, West Midlands, England. Wellandport Women's Institute Tweedmere History newspaper clipping, September 1919, remembers Baden Robson as serving in Siberia. From a home child to Siberia, something else. Private William or Bill Graham Henderson. William Graham Henderson was born August 1st, 1890 in Brussels, Ontario, the son of Robert and Elizabeth or Isabella McCullum Henderson. On the census 1901 and 1911, William is living with his parents, sister, and brother in the village of Brussels, Huron County, Ontario. In 1911, William is working as a laborer. When William enlisted with the 176th Battalion CEF on March 20th, 1916 in St. Catharines, Ontario, he stated his present address was Port Colborne, Ontario. His trade was druggist. He was single. His date of birth was August the 1st, 1890. He had never served in any military service and listed his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Henderson of Brussels, Ontario, as his next of kin. On May 16, 1916, while still in Canada, Private W.G. Henderson was promoted to corporal, and on July 18, 1916, he was promoted to sergeant. Private Henderson sailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia on April 29th aboard the SS Olympic and arrived in Liverpool, England on May 7, 1917. William Henderson had many rank changes during his military career. Lance Sergeant, acting corporal, acting last sergeant, then on July 13, 1917, Sergeant Henderson reversed at his own request to the rank of private and proceeded overseas to France with the 12th Reserve Battalion. On arriving in France, he is assigned to the Canadian Army Medical Corps. July 5th, 1918, with the rank of acting sergeant, W.G. Henderson was transferred back to England, admitted to IX or 9 Canadian General Hospital at Moore Barracks, Shorncliffe, England, with influenza, and was discharged from the hospital on July 16, 1918. Sergeant Henderson reverts to rank of private on October 22, 1918, before embarking overseas to France on October 23rd, arriving in Le Havre, France on October 24, 1918. He was transferred to the 12th Field Ambulance Corps on November 8, 1918. Private Henderson sailed to England from Le Havre, France on April 28, 1918, and proceeded to Canada for demobilization on May 31st, 1919, aboard the HMTS Mauritania. Acting Sergeant Henderson served in Canada, Britain, and France with the Canadian Army Medical Corps. Private Henderson, his rank at that time of retirement, of the 12th Field Ambulance Corps, received an honor discharge due to demobilization, the British War and Victory Medals. He was discharged on June 8, 1919, in Hamilton, Ontario. His proposed residence after discharge was Brussels, Ontario. On November 30th, 1920, in Port Colborne, Ontario, William Graham Henderson, occupation druggist, married Elizabeth Cross, the daughter of Alexander and Alice Alberta Springer Cross. William Henderson owned and operated a pharmacy in Smithville since 1922. In 1925, a fire damaged the pharmacy. The building was rebuilt and the business continued for many years. He was also a member and past master mason of Coronation Lodge number 502 AF and AM GRD in Smithville. William Graham Henderson died October 2nd, 1956, and is buried in Smithville United Church Cemetery. He is remembered as a veteran of World War I on page 65 of the Book of Memories of Smithville, 1787 to 1950. Note that if a soldier went overseas to France from England, he did so with the rank of private. That's why many requested to be reversed to a private so they could go over to fight. I would like to remember these men more than just names, and hope I have succeeded to shed some light on their lives of these brave men during and after the war. Thank you.
So good evening, all. Thanks for joining us in person. We do have smaller numbers in-house, and I know that there's at least 20 or 25 online, and that's fantastic. We do appreciate, Joanne, the efforts that you've done. Putting a book together is just a lot of work, and probably more work than I'm willing to commit to at any given time. How much is your book? $28 for the book. And approximately how many names would you say it's in the book? 189 biographies. That's phenomenal. In genealogy, and for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Fulton, and I'm with the Niagara branch, and I want to recognize Amanda, who's in the back end doing all the typing, and my wife is out in another room making sure that it's all working. So finding names and dates is great. We all know that. But it's about that dash. And this is what Joanne has done. She's filled in that dash of these people's lives. You know, where they are, who they were, where they lived, where they worked, where they slept, you know, how they served. It's phenomenal work, and I know our branch, for starters, is going to get a couple books. I'm going to arrange that with you, and then I would clearly say to anyone online, if you are interested in this book, you can reach out to the branch. If that's the case, then you don't get 200 people contacting you. You can reach out to the branch. You can send an email to niagara@ogs.on.ca, and we can arrange with Joanne to get the money and to get the book to you. So we'll kind of be that intermediary, and we won't charge anything extra to do that. So again, I don't want to take this much time. I just really appreciate your efforts and your work. Remembering our veterans is very, very important. I've just recently joined a Legion, and it's very near and dear to my heart as well. But thanks again. Have a good night. And don't don't forget that our website is there. There's more content going on. The master index. We've just put the surname pedigree charts on our research section for free, so you can see them there. There's lots. The website's always changing. So if it's been more than 30 or 60 days since you've been there, I suggest that you go back. So, and I guess this is the last one for the year. So we're going to have a great lineup in 2024. I've just got a few ideas, but I haven't shared them with Amanda yet. Oh yeah, sign up for the newsletter. Right, because that's how you stay connected with us. And it's free. Who doesn't like free? So yeah, we won't see anybody till 2024. So from our branch, from myself, from my family, and everyone here, we want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a great New Year. So have a great night. Take care. Drop us a line.